नमस्ते एवरीवन, बोलिए सत्य सनातन वैदिक धर्म की जय। क्या हालचाल आप सबके। आई एम सॉरी आज मैं लेट हो गया। आई हैड फ्यू अदर एंगेजमेंट्स एंड आई मेक श्योर कि हम आज का जो भी कंटेंट है वो हम पूरा कर पाए। नहीं, आप नवरात्रि का फास्ट रख रहे हैं कि नहीं ये बताएगा। मेरा तो हर बार का रहता है, आई डू कीप इट। अब हम आ जाते हैं, हम वेदांता फिलॉसफी पढ़ रहे हैं एंड शंकर स्कूल ऑफ वेदांता स्पेसिफिकली। तो हमने शंकर के स्कूल से पहले क्या क्या इम्प्रूवमेंट्स हुई थी एंड क्या क्या टर्मिनोलॉजीज यूज हुई थी, हमने वो सब देखा। एक सेकंड होल्ड कीजिएगा, सॉरी वो नेटवर्क का कुछ मुझे सेटिंग करनी थी, वो मैं करना भूल गया था। सो या ऑलराइट, तो अब हम वेदांता एंड शंकरा वो देखेंगे 788 से 820 एडी। Vedanta philosophy is the philosophy which claims to be the exposition of the philosophy taught, taught in the Upanishads and summarized in the Brahma Sutras of Bhadrayana. भद्रायना के बारे में हमने पिछली क्लास में पढ़ा था, जस्ट एक क्लास पीछे आप जाएंगे तो। The Upanishads from the last part of the Veda literature and its philosophy is therefore also called sometimes the Uttar Mimamsa. The Upanishads form the last part of Veda literature, right? And its philosophy is therefore also sometimes called Uttar Mimamsa or the Mimamsa, decision, of the later part of Vedas as distinguished from the Mimamsa of the previous part of Vedas. And the Brahmanas as incorporated in the Purva Mimamsa Sutras of Jaimini. तो अगर आप उपनिषद्स को देखेंगे that are called as Uttar Mimamsa or the Mimamsa, the decision of the latter part of Vedas as distinguished from the Mimamsa of the previous part of Vedas. तो उपनिषद्स की इक्विवेलेंस दी गई है. Though these Brahma Sutras were differently interpreted by different exponents, the views expressed in the earliest commentary on them, now available, written by Shankaracharya, have attained wonderful celebrity, both on account of the subtle and deep ideas it contains, and also on account of association of the illustrious personality of Shankara. So great is the influence of the philosophy propounded by Shankara and elaborated by his illustrious followers that whenever we speak of Vedanta philosophy, we mean the philosophy that was propounded by Shankara. If other expositions were intended, the names of exponents have to be mentioned. Example Ramanuja Mata, Vallabha Mata, etc. In this chapter, we shall limit ourselves to the exposition of Vedanta philosophy as elaborated by Shankara and his followers. The Shankara work, the commentaries on the Brahma Sutras and the 10 Upanishads, many ideas have been briefly incorporated which are found in Shankara to do not appear to be sufficiently clear, but are more intelligible as elaborated by his followers. It is therefore better to take up the Vedanta system not as we find it in Shankara, but as elaborated by his followers, all of whom openly declare that they are true to their master's philosophy. On the other hand, for the other Hindu systems of thought, the sutras, Jaimini Sutra, Nyaya Sutra, etc., are the only original treatises, and no foundation other than these are available. In the case of Vedanta, however, the original source is the Upanishads, and the sutras are but an extremely condensed summary in a systematic form. Shankara did not claim to be the inventor of the expounder of an original system, but but interpreted the sutras and the Upanishads in order to show that there existed a connected and systematic philosophy in the Upanishads, which was also enunciated in the sutras of Bhadrayana. The Upanishads were a part of Vedas and were thus regarded as infallible by the Hindus. If Shankara could only show that his exposition of them was the right one, then his philosophy, being founded upon the highest authority, would be accepted by all Hindus. The most formidable opponents in the way of accomplishing his task were the Mimamsaks, who held that the Vedas did not preach any philosophy. For whatever there was in the Vedas was to be interpreted as issuing commands to us for performing this or that action. They held that if the Upanishads spoke of Brahman and demonstrated the nature of its pure essence, these were mere exaggerations intended to put the commandments of performing some kind of worship of Brahman into a more attractive form. Shankara could not deny that the purport of the Vedas, as found in the Brahmanas, was explicitly of a mandatory nature as declared by the Mimamsa. But he sought to prove that such could not be the purport of the Upanishads, which spoke of the truest and the highest knowledge of the Absolute, by which the wise could attain salvation. He said that in the Karma Kanda, the sacrificial injunctions, Brahmanas of the Vedas, the purport of the Vedas was certainly of a mandatory nature, and as it was intended for ordinary people who was anxious for this and or that pleasure, and were never actuated by any desire of knowing the absolute truth, but the Upanishads, which were intended for the wise who had controlled their senses and became disinclined to all earthly joys, demonstrated the one absolute unchangeable Brahman as the only truth of the universe. इसमें बस ये कहना चाह रहे हैं कि जो वेदास में जो लिखा हुआ है उसको थोड़ा एग्जैजरेट करके लिखा हुआ है, बट इसमें दो कमेंट्स हो सकते हैं. वन कमेंट इज, क्या हम वो चीज अचीव नहीं कर पा रहे इसलिए हम एग्जैजरेशन कर रहे हैं. जैसे many times you are reading certain graphs. So while you are reading certain graphs, you are getting to know certain you are actually able to identify what could happen in the future. फ्यूचर में क्या हो सकता है, क्या नहीं हो सकता है, ये आप आइडेंटिफाई कर पाते हो. लेकिन कुछ ऐसे एलिमेंट्स आपको दिख जाते हैं कि आपको लगता है ये हो ही नहीं पाएगा, तो आप ऐसे कहते हो यार एग्जैजरेट हो रहा है. वैसे ही जब हम वेदास को पढ़ते हैं, वेदास में जितने भी स्क्रिप्चर्स ब्राह्मणास जो बोले गए हैं उसमें जो विधि के विधान बताए गए हैं, विधि बताई गई है कि यू में से क्या चीज़ें करनी है, क्या चीज़ें नहीं करनी, हाउ टू आइडेंटिफाई, हाउ नॉट टू आइडेंटिफाई, ये सारी चीज़ें जब आप देखते हैं, देन मोर और लेस इसमें आपका क्या रीज़न रहता है कि आपको उसे फॉलो करना पड़ेगा. हाउ विल यू मेक द अदर पर्सन फॉलो? आप दूसरे बंदे को फॉलो तभी करा पाओगे जब आप उसकी स्टोरीज बनाओगे, जब आप उसके कुछ एग्जैजरेशंस ही बता दोगे, क्योंकि these are some certain exaggerations, these are certain benefits, these are certain proofs, ये सारी चीज़ें आप बता दोगे, तब तो you can definitely identify what is true, what is not, right? तो उस वे में बात की गई है कि वेदास में हमें करना तो वही है, एंड वी हैव they accept the testimony of भगवान, and they accept कि there is some absolute entity who made it, but उसमें कुछ चीज़ें exaggerated है ताकि हम follow कर पाएं. Demonstrate one absolute unchangeable Brahman as the only truth of the universe. One absolute unchangeable Brahman, that is ईश्वरा only. क्योंकि और आत्मन कि जो हम जो चीज़ देखते हैं, हम कैसे कोई चीज़ चेंज होती देखते हैं क्योंकि हम स्टेबल हैं. If we are stable, we are able to see things changing. We are able to see people changing. We are able to see various things, right? The two parts of the Vedas were intended for two classes of person. Shankara thus did not begin by formulating a philosophy of his own by logical and psychological analysis, induction, and deduction. He tried to show by textual comparison of different Upanishads and by reference to the content of passages in the Upanishads that they were concerned in demonstrating the nature of Brahman as he understood it, as their ultimate end. He had thus to be sure to show that the uncontradicted testimony of all the Upanishads was in favor of the view which he held. उन्होंने कहा दो अलग अलग इंसानों के लिए बने हैं उपनिषद। तो उन्होंने पहले ये नहीं किया कि फॉर्मुलेट किया फिलॉसफी, अपनी फिलॉसफी या साइकोलॉजिकल एनालिसिस, इंडक्शन या डिडक्शन। he tried to show by textual comparison of different upanishads and by reference to the content of passages in upanishads that they were concerned in demonstrating the nature of brahman as he understood it, as the ultimate end. He had thus to show that the uncontradicted testimony of all the Upanishads was in favor of the view which he held. He had to explain all doubtful and apparent conflicting texts and also to show that none of the texts referred to the doctrines of Mahat, Prakriti, etc. of the Sankhya. उन्होंने ये भी दिखाया कि कोई भी टेक्स्ट रेफर नहीं करता है महत प्रकृति एटसेट्रा ऑफ सांख्या. He had also to interpret the few scattered ideas about physics, cosmology, eschatology, etc., that are found in the Upanishads consistently with the Brahmana philosophy. In order to show that the philosophy of the Upanishads, as he expounded it, was a consistent system, he had to remove all the objections that his opponent could make regarding the Brahman philosophy, to criticize the philosophies of all other schools, to prove them to be self contradicting, and to show that any interpretation of the Upanishads other than that which he gave was inconsistent and wrong. Thus, he did not only in his Bhashya and the Brahma Sutra, but also in the commentaries on the Upanishads. Logic with him had a subordinate place, as its main value for us was the aid which it lent to consistent interpretation of the purport of the Upanishad text, and to persuading the mind to accept the uncontradicted testimony of the Upanishads as the absolute truth. His discipline followed him in all, and moreover showed in great detail that the Brahmana philosophy was never contradicted either in perceptual experience or in rational thought, and that all the realistic categories which Nyaya and other systems had put forth were self contradictory and erroneous. They also supplemented his philosophy by constructing a Vedanta epistemology and by rethinking elaborately the relation of the Maya and the Brahman and the world of appearance and other relevant topics. ये भी एक अच्छी बात इसमें बताई जाती है, व्हेन यू आर रिसर्चिंग तो आपके डिसाइपल्स भी उसी में ही काम करते हैं, ये आज की रिसर्च में दिखता नहीं है, एटलीस्ट इन प्राइवेट स्कूल्स तो बिल्कुल नहीं दिखता. His discipline, his disciples followed him in all, and moreover showed in great detail that Brahmana philosophy was never contradicted either in perceptual experience or in rational thought, and that all the realistic categories which Nyaya and other systems had put forth were self-contradictory and erroneous. They also supplemented his philosophy by constructing a Vedanta epistemology and by rethinking elaborately the relation of the Maya, the Brahman, and the world of appearance and other relevant topics. Many problems of great philosophical interest which had been left out or slightly touched by Shankara were discussed fully by his followers. जो टॉपिक्स उन्होंने स्लाइटली टच किए थे वो उनके फॉलोअर्स ने आगे बढ़ाए. जैसे कई बार आजकल के रिसर्च में भी होता है, यू लीव अ सर्टेन गैप फॉर अदर्स टू एक्सप्लोर एज वेल. आपने ये दो तरीके से होता है यार आजकल, कि जैसे मुझे जस्ट एक पेपर छापना है एंड जस्ट फॉर द हेक ऑफ इट आई एम राइटिंग अ पेपर एंड इन द एंड आई हैव लेफ्ट a void. But it should always be remembered that philosophical reasoning and criticisms are always to be taken up as but aids for convincing our intellect and strengthening our faith in the truth revealed in the Upanishads. The true work of logic is to adapt the mind to accept them. Logic used for upsetting the instructions of the Upanishads is logic gone astray. Many lives of Shankaracharya written in Sanskrit, such as Shankara Digvijaya, Shankara Vijaya Vilasa, Shankara Jaya, etc., it is regarded as almost certain that he was born between 700 to 800 AD in the Malabar country in the Deccan. His father, Shivaguru, was a Yajurvedi Brahman of the Kshatriya branch. Many miracles are related of Shankara, and he is believed to have been the incarnation of Shiva. He turned ascetic in his eighth year and became a disciple of Govinda, a renowned sage then residing in the mountain cell on the banks of Narbuda. नर्मदा नर्मदा शायद नर्मदा को बोला हुआ है. He then came over to Banaras and thence went to Badarikshrama. Badarikshama. It is said that he wrote his illustrious Bhashya on the Brahma Sutra in his 12th year. Later on, he also wrote his commentaries on 10 Upanishads. He returned to Banaras, and from the time forth he decided to travel all over India in order to defeat the adherents of other schools or thoughts in open debate. It is said that he first went to meet Kumarila, but Kumarila was then at a point of death, and he advised him to meet Kumarila's disciples. He defeated Mandana and converted him into an ascetic follower of his own. He then traveled in various places and defeated his opponents. Everywhere he established his Vedanta philosophy, which from the time forth acquired a dominant influence in molding the religious life in India. ये हमारे यहाँ अब खत्म हो चुका है. देखिए, हमारे यहाँ के रूल्स अब इतने बदल चुके हैं कि हम ये सोचते हैं नहीं, हम किसी को कन्वर्ट नहीं करेंगे, हम किसी को फोर्स नहीं करेंगे अपने धर्म में, हम ऐसा नहीं करेंगे, वैसा नहीं करेंगे. बट इफ़ यू आर अ फिलोसोफर, आपका तो ये फिर धर्म बनता है कि आप दूसरों को जाके अपने धर्म के बारे में बताएं और उनको सही राह दिखाएं. मैं फोर्सली नहीं कह रहा हूँ, यहाँ पे तो फोर्सफुली छोड़ी, यहाँ पे तो हम अपना धर्म आगे प्रचार करने से डरते हैं. यहाँ पे तो लिखा हुआ है शंकरा ने कि once he found that he has got a good theory for other people to explore, he even went to Kumarila. And Kumarila, because he was on the verge of death, he said कि आप मेरे शिष्यों से बात कर लो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं. And this was an open debate and open fight. इसमें ये डर तो होता नहीं था किसी में कि हाई ये कन्वर्ट हो जाए, या कन्वर्ट कल होता है आज हो जाए. बट दे हैड अ फाइटिंग स्प्री. अगर आप एक फिलोसोफर हैं, अगर आप अलग अलग थ्योरीज के ज्ञाता हैं, तो आपको दूसरों को भी तो बताना चाहिए ना कि क्या चीज सही है, क्या चीज गलत है. Shankara carried on the work of his teacher Gaudapada by writing commentaries. भाई साहब ये बड़ा है, हो जाएगा कंप्लीट आज. Shankara carried on the work of his teacher Gaudapada and by writing commentaries on the 10 Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras tried to prove that the absolutist creed was the one which was intended to be preached in the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras. Throughout his commentary on the Brahma Sutras, there is ample evidence that he was contending against some other rival interpretations of the dualistic tendency, which held that Upanishads partly favored the Sankhya cosmology of the existence of Prakriti. That these were actual textual interpretations of the Brahma Sutras is proved by the fact that Shankara in some places tries to show that these textual constructions were faulty. In one place, he says that that other, referring according to the Vachaspati of the to the Mimamsa, and some of us referring probably to those who interpreted the sutras and the Upanishads from the Vedanta point of view, think that the soul is permanent. It is to refute all those who were opposed to the right doctrine of conceiving everything as the unity of the self, Atmekatva, that the Shariraka commentary of the mind is being attempted. Ramanuja is the introductory portion of his Bhashya on the Brahma Sutra, says that the views of Bodhayana, who wrote an elaborate commentary on Brahma Sutra, were summarized by previous teachers, and that he was following his Bodhayana Bhashya in writing his commentary. In Vedartha Samgraha of Ramanuja, mention is made of Bodhayana, Tanka, Guhadeva, Kapardin, Baruchi as Vedantic authorities, and Dravidacharya is referred to as Bhashyakara, commentator. In Chandogya III, where the Upanishad cosmology appeared to be different from Vishnu Purana cosmology, Shankara refers to an explanation offered on the point by one whom he calls Acharya. Atroktaha Pariharaha Acharya, and Anandagiri says that Acharya there refers to Dravidacharya. This Dravidacharya is known to us from Ramanuja's statement as being a commentator of the dualistic school, and we have evidence here that he had written a commentary on Chandogya Upanishad. A study of extant commentaries on the Brahma Sutras of Badrayana by the adherents of different schools of thought leaves us convinced that these sutras were regarded by all as condensations of the teaching of the Upanishads. The differences of the opinion were with regard to the meaning of the sutras and the Upanishads texts, to which references were made by them in each particular case. The Brahma Sutra is divided into four adhyayas or books, and each of these is divided into four chapters or padas. Each of these contains a number of topic or discussions, adhikarana, which are composed of a number of sutras which raise the point of at issue, the point which lead the doubt and uncertainty and considerations that should lead one to favor. A particular conclusion. As explained by Shankara, most of the sutras, except the first four and the first two chapters of the second book, are devoted to the textual interpretation of the Upanishad passages. Shankara's methods of explaining the absolutist Vedanta creed does not consist in proving the Vedanta to be a consistent system of metaphysics, complete in all parts, but in so interpreting the Upanishads texts as to show that they all agree in holding the Brahman to be the self and that alone to be the only truth. In chapter 1 of book 2, Shankara tries to answer some of the objections that may be made from the Sankhya point of view against his absolutist creed and show that some apparent difficulties of the absolutist doctrine did not present any real difficulty. In chapter 2 of book 2, he tries to refute the Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, the Buddhist, Jain, Bhagavata, and Shaiva system of thought. These two chapters and his commentaries on the first four sutras contain the main points of his system. The rest of the work is mainly occupied in showing that the conclusion of the sutras was always in strict agreement with the Upanishad doctrine. Reason with Shankara never occupied the premier position. Its value was considered only secondary, only so far as it helped one of the right understanding of the revealed scriptures, the Upanishads. The ultimate truth cannot be known by reason alone. What one debater shows to be reasonable, a more expert debater shows to be false, and what he shows to be right is again proved to be false by another debater. So there is no final certainty to which we can arrive by logical and argument alone. The ultimate truth can thus only be found in the Upanishads. Reason, discrimination, and judgment are all to be used only with a view to the discovery of the real purport of the Upanishads. From his own position, Shankara was not thus bound to vindicate the position of the Vedanta as a thoroughly rational system of metaphysics. For its truth did not depend on its rationality, but on the authority of the Vedas. But what was true could not contradict experience. If therefore Shankara interpretation of the Upanishads was true, then it would not contradict experience. Shankara was therefore bound to show that his interpretation was rational and did not contradict experience. If he could show that his interpretation was the only interpretation that was faithful to the Upanishads, and that its apparent contradictions with experience could in some way be explained, he considered that he had nothing more to do. He was not writing a philosophy in the modern sense of the term, but giving us the whole truth as taught and revealed in the Upanishads, and not simply a system spun by a clever thinker, and may erroneously appear to be quite reasonable. Ultimate validity does not belong to reason but to the scriptures. He started with the premise that whatever may be the reason, it is a fact that all experience starts and moves in an error which identifies the self with the body, the senses, or the objects of the senses. ये सही है कि हम जो भी चीज़ करते हैं, हम स्टार्टिंग में तो ये बोलते हैं कि हम कर रहे हैं, हमने काम किया एंड ऑल दैट. होता है या नहीं, दैट इज अ डिफरेंट इशू. All cognitive acts presuppose this illusory identification, for without it the pure self can never behave as a phenomenal knower and perceiver, and without such a perceiver there would be no cognitive act. Shankara does not try to prove philosophically the existence of the pure self as distinct from all other things, for he is satisfied in showing that Upanishads describe the pure self unattached to any kind of impurity as the ultimate truth. This with him is a matter to which no exception can be taken, for it is so revealed in the Upanishads. This point being granted, the next point is that our experience is always based upon an identification of the self with the bodies, the senses, etc. And this imposition of all phenomenal qualities of pleasure, pain, etc. upon the self. And this with Shankara is a beginningless illusion. All this had been said by Gaudapada. Shankara accepted Gaudapada's conclusion but did not develop his dialectic for a positive proof of his thesis. He made use of the dialectic only for the refutation of other systems of thought. This being done, he thought that he had nothing more to do than to show that his idea was in agreement with the teachings of the Upanishads. He showed that the Upanishads held that the pure self is pure as pure being, pure intelligence, and pure bliss as the ultimate truth. This being accepted, the world as it appears could not be real. It must be mere magic, a show of illusion or Maya. Shankara never tries to prove that the world is Maya, but accepts it is indisputable. शंकर ने कभी प्रूव नहीं किया था बट ये एक्सेप्ट कर लिया था कि इनडिस्प्यूटेबल फैक्ट है कि जो संसार है वो माया है. He had thus to quarrel on one side with the Mimamsa realists and on the other with the Sankhya realists, both of whom accept the validity of scriptures but interpreted them in their own way. The Mimamsis held that everything that is said in the Vedas is to be interpreted as requiring us to perform particular kinds of action. तो मीमांसस ये कहते थे कि वेदास में जो भी लिखा हुआ है दे रिक्वायर अस टू परफॉर्म सर्टेन एक्शन और टू डिजिस्ट फ्रॉम डूइंग सर्टेन अदर काइंड्स. हमारे वेदास में यही तो लिखा हो कि क्या करना चाहिए क्या नहीं करना चाहिए. हम अष्टांग योग का एग्जाम्पल होता है कि क्या चीज़ करनी चाहिए क्या नहीं करनी चाहिए एंड अदर सूत्रास एज वेल. This would mean that the Upanishads, being a part of Veda, should also be interpreted as containing injunctions for the performance of certain kind of action. The description of Brahman in the Upanishads does not therefore represent a simple statement of nature of Brahman, but it implies that Brahman should be meditated upon as possessing the particular nature described there. Brahman should be meditated upon as being an entity which possesses a nature which is identical with ourselves. Such a procedure would then lead to beneficial results to the man who so meditates. Shankara could not agree to such a view. For his main point was that the Upanishads reveal the highest truth as the Brahman. No meditation or worship or action of any kind was required, but one reached absolute wisdom and emancipation when the truth dawned on him that Brahman or self was the ultimate reality. The teachings of the other parts of Vedas, the Karma Kanda, those dealing with injunctions relating to the performance of duties and actions, were intended for inferior type of aspirants, whereas the teachings of Upanishads, the Jnana Kanda, those which declare the nature of ultimate truth and reality, were intended only for superior aspirants who had transcended the limits of sacrificial duties and actions and who had no desire for any earthly blessings or for any heavenly joy. Throughout his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, Shankara tried to demonstrate that those who should follow the injunction of the Vedas and perform Vedic deeds, such as sacrifice, etc., belong to a lower order. So long as they remained in that order, they had no right to follow the higher teachings of the Upanishads. They were but karmins, performers of scriptural duties. When they succeeded in purging their minds of all desires which lead them to the performance of the Vedic injunctions, the field of karma marg, the path of duty, and wanted to know the truth alone, they entered the Gyan marg, the way of wisdom, and had no duties to perform. The study of Vedanta was thus reserved for advanced persons who were no longer inclined to ordinary joys of life but wanted complete emancipation. The qualifications necessary for the man intended to study the Vedanta are one. ये काफ़ी अच्छा एग्जाम्पल है जिसमें मैं इसका एक कंसेप्ट समझा देता हूँ. हमने भगवत गीता क्या, जब आप अगर आप भगवत गीता की प्लेलिस्ट फॉलो कर रहे हैं तो भगवत गीता में हमने ज्ञान योग पढ़ लिया, मीमांसा का एंड कर्म योग पढ़ लिया, राइट. तो उसमें जब हम कर्म कर रहे होते हैं, जब हम ज्ञान ले रहे होते हैं, तब वी आर स्ट्राइवर्स, उसमें स्ट्राइवर्स लिखा हुआ था, वी आर जस्ट स्ट्राइवर. बट अगर हमारे अंदर से वो भावना किसी कुछ हासिल करने की या फिर इकट्ठी करने की, ये सारी भावनाएं जब खत्म हो जाएंगी पूरी तरीके से, उसके बाद यू बिकम सेज और उसके बाद यू बिकम एमेंसिपेटेड, राइट. तो उसमें ये लिखा हुआ है कि पहले तो हम सिर्फ निचले तबके के हैं, हम सिर्फ काम कर रहे हैं। जैसे मैं निचले तबका का हूँ, मैं सिर्फ कर्म कर रहा हूँ, मैं अपने आप को सुधार रहा हूँ। ये लाइव इसलिए ताकि मैं अपने आप को सुधार पाऊँ, ये लाइव इसलिए ताकि मैं अपने अंदर और चेंजेस ला सकूँ, राइट? जब ये सारी चीजें हो जाएंगी, व्हेन ऑल दीज थिंग्स विल बी कंप्लीट, और जब मेरे अंदर हल्की सी भी हल्की सी भी काम वासना नहीं रहेगी, उसके बाद इट वुड बी लाइक कि ठीक है, नाउ आई एम ऑन अ राइट ट्रैक, और मैं फिर वेदांत पढ़ सकता हूँ। तो वेदांता की क्वालिफिकेशंस लिखी हुई है: डिसर्निंग नॉलेज अबाउट व्हाट इज इटर्नल एंड व्हाट इज ट्रांजिटरी। आपको पहले तो ये नॉलेज होना चाहिए कि क्या ट्रांजिटरी है, क्या इटर्नल है, यानी कि क्या चीज़ रहेगी, क्या चीज़ नहीं रहेगी। अब जैसे ये बॉटल है, क्या ये हमेशा रहेगी? नहीं। क्या ट्रांजिएंट है? हाँ। Second, disinclination to enjoyment of pleasures of this world, or of the afterworld. एक तो एंजॉयमेंट यहाँ का, लेकिन कुछ लोग एंजॉयमेंट आगे का भी सोचते हैं, हूरे टाइप के 72 हूरे मिलेंगी, इतनी हूरे मिलेंगी। तो ये भी लिखा हुआ है कि अगर आप वेदांता पढ़ते हो तो आप ना अभी का प्लेजर पा सकते हो ना आगे का। हमारे हिंदू में भी होता था कि स्वर्ग लोक मिल जाएगा, इंद्रलोक मिल जाएगा। बेटा लोक से वापस इधर ही आने का है। आपके जितने भी अच्छे कर्म है, जो हमने भगवत गीता में भी पढ़ा था कि आपके जितने भी अच्छे कर्म हैं वो आपको ऊपर तो ले जाएंगे, क्योंकि आप वो जो कर्म कर रहे हो वो एक्शंस के बेसिस पे कर रहे हो। आप एक्शंस कर रहे हो ताकि आपको वो फल मिले, लेकिन आप डिसइंटरेस्टेड होकर एक्शन करोगे तो वो फल नहीं मिलेगा, बट आपको जन्म कर्म के बंधन से मुक्त हो जाओगे। इस केस में आप मुक्त नहीं होगे, इस केस में आप ऊपर जाओगे, फल भोगोगे और वापस नीचे आ जाओगे, राइट? और थर्ड है अटेनमेंट ऑफ पीस, सेल्फ रिस्ट्रेंट, renunciation, पेशेंस, डीप कंसंट्रेशन एंड फेथ, एंड डिजायर फॉर salvation, मुमुक्षुत्व, right? The person who had these qualifications should study the Upanishads, and as soon as he became convinced of the truth about the identity of the self and the Brahman, he attained emancipation. When once a man realized that the self alone was a reality and all else was Maya, all injunctions ceased to have any force with them. Thus, the path of duty is karma, and the path of wisdom, jnana, were intended for different classes of persons or adhikarins. There could be no joint performance of Vedic duties and the seeking of the highest truth as taught in the Upanishads. Jnana karma samuchaya bhava. As against the dualists, he tried to show that Upanishads never favored any kind of dualistic interpretations. The main difference between the Vedanta, as expounded by Gaudapada and as explained by Shankara, consists in this: that Shankara tried as best he could to dissociate the distinctive Buddhist traits found in the exposition of the former and to formulate the philosophy as a direct interpretation of the older Upanishads texts. In this, he achieved remarkable success. He was no doubt regarded by some as a hidden Buddhist, Prachana Bodha, but uh, his influence on Hindu taught a religion became so great that he was regarded in later times as being almost a divine person or an incarnation. His immediate disciples, the disciple of his disciples, and those who adhered to his doctrine in the succeeding generations tried to build a rational basis of his system in much stronger way than Shankara did. Our treatment of Shankara's philosophy has been based on the interpretations of Vedanta thought as offered by these followers of Shankara. These interpretations are nowhere in conflict with Shankara's doctrine, but the question and problem which Shankara did not raise have been raised and discussed by his followers. and without these one could not treat Vedanta as a complete and coherent system of metaphysics. As these will be discussed in the later sections, we may close this with the short description of some of the main features of Vedanta taught as explained by Shankara. अब हम वेदांता थॉट को एक्सप्लेन करेंगे as explained by Shankara. Brahman, according to Shankara, is the cause from which proceeds the origin of substance and dissolution of the world, which is extended in names and forms, which includes many agents and enjoyers, which contain the fruit of work, especially determined according to the space, time, and cause. A world which is formed after an arrangement inconceivable even by the imagination of the mind. The reason that Shankara adduces for the existence of Brahman may be considered to be threefold. The world must have been produced as the modification of something, but in the Upanishads, all other things have been spoken of as having been originated from something other than Brahman. So Brahman is the cause from which the world has sprung into being. But we could not think that Brahman itself originated from something else. For then we should have a regressus ad infinitum. The world must have been produced as a modification of something, but in the Upanishad all the other things have been spoken of as having being originated from something other than Brahman. So Brahman is the cause from which the world has sprung into being. तो इसमें ब्राह्मण को you can say it as a Atman, or it is, you can say it as a ईश्वरा, राइट. तो इसमें बस ये बताया गया कि हम ये नहीं कह सकते हैं कि आत्मन से कुछ बन रहा है या फिर ब्राह्मण से कुछ बन रहा है तो उससे भी ब्राह्मण बने, तो फिर वो एड इन्फिनिटम हो जाएगा. उन्होंने बस ये बोला है कि दिस इज अ पावर दैट हेल्प्स इन चेंजिंग द वेरियस फॉर्म्स, राइट. Brahman, according to yes, second, the world is so orderly that it could not have come forth from a non-intelligent source. The intelligent source then from which the world has come into being is Brahman. दूसरा पॉइंट ये था कि जो वर्ल्ड ऐसा तो नहीं है कि अनइंटेलिजेंट सोर्स से आया होगा, तो जो इंटेलिजेंट सोर्स है दैट इज कॉल्ड ब्राह्मण. थर्ड, द ब्राह्मण इज द इमीडिएट कॉन्शियसनेस साक्षी which shines as the self, as well as through the object of cognition with which the self knows. It is thus the essence of us all, the self, and hence it remains undenied even when one tries to deny it. For even in the denial, it shows itself forth. It is the self of us all and is hence even present to all, to us in all our cognitions. Brahman, according to Shankara, is the identity of pure intelligence, pure being, and pure blessedness. Brahman is the self of us all. So long as we are in our ordinary waking life, we are identifying the self with thousands of illusory things, with all that we call I or mine. But when in dreamless sleep, we are absolutely without any touch of these phenomenal notions. The nature of our true state as pure blissness is partially realized. The individual self as it appears is but an appearance only, while the real truth is the truth self, is the true self, which is one for all, as pure intelligence, pure blessedness, and pure beings. All creation is illusory Maya, but accepting it is Maya. It as Maya. It may be conceived that God, Ishvara, created the world as a mere spot. From the true point of view, there is no Ishvara who creates the world, but in the in the sense in which the world exists, and we all exist as separate individuals, we can affirm the existence of Ishvara as engaged in creating and maintaining the world. In reality, all creation is illusory, and so the creator also is illusory. Brahman, the self, is at once the material cause, upadana karak, karan, as well as the efficient cause, nimitta karan, of the world. There is no difference between the cause and the effect, and the effect is but an illusory imposition on the cause, a mere illusion of name and form. We may mold clay into plates and jugs and call them by so many different names, but it cannot be admitted that they are, by that fact, anything more than clay. Their transformation as plates and jugs are only appearance of name and form, nama rupa. The world, in as much as it is but an effect imposed upon by Brahman, is only phenomenally existent, vyavharika, as mere objects of names and forms, nama rupa. But the cause, Brahman, is alone the true reality, Paramarthika. All that is important in Shankara commentary of the Brahman Sutra has been excellently systemized by Dawson in the systems of Vedanta. It is therefore unnecessary for me to give any long account of this part. Most of what follows has been taken from the writings of his followers. Right? अब हम आगे कल पढ़ेंगे द मेन आइडिया ऑफ वेदांता. हमने इसमें बस यही देखा कि जो अगर आप भगवत गीता पढ़ रहे हैं, भगवत गीता फॉलो कर रहे हैं, बेसिकली उसी के कंसेप्ट हैं, बस इसमें ब्राह्मण बोल दिया गया है. तो all the things that are being made, they are manifestations of God only, and and the changes as well. जैसे क्ले और पॉट का एग्जांपल बताया था, तो क्ले और पॉट के एग्जांपल में भी यही है. क्ले बाद में सूख के क्ले का ही रूप बन जाते हैं ना, पॉट पॉट. तो वही उसी चीज को हमने एक्सप्लेन किया हुआ है. I hope you like this video. If you like this video, please kindly like, share and subscribe my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Jai Shri Ram.